Hi again. In this movie, we're going to look at 3 loops: the regular for loop, which I call the regular for loop because it was around long before the for each loop, the while loop, a regular while loop, and a while loop with using an iterator. Okay? So let's start off with this regular for loop. The for each loop is a relatively recent addition to Java because collections in Java have become increasingly important, and when you're going through each element of a collection, like an array list, for each loop is just a really easy way to move through all the elements of the collection, so it was added to make things easier. The traditional for loop works like this. It has 3 parts: a starting condition for the variable, a condition that will stop the loop when that condition is no longer true, and how the loop variable changes each time you've gone through the body of the loop. I use LCV for my integer variable here. You could use anything. I use LCV, it stands for loop control variable. I'll often use LCV just as it's kind of a convention I use. But you can use whatever you want. Okay. So this should not be 17, by the way. This should be 10. So the way this works is, well, we've made an array list here of lot. The array list is called lots. A lot, by the way, is this is from a project in chapter 4 in your textbook. A project that deals or makes a program that handles auctions, and lots are items, collections of items that are sold in an auction. So this is an array list of lot objects, and it's called lots. So back to the for loop. So we start our loop control variable LCV equal 0. Again, that should be 10, and we increment it every time we've gone through the body of the loop. In this case, the body of the loop is just this one line. And so what are we doing? We're adding a new lot object to the array list. And so this is basically building this array list down here. Right? We're going to add these lot objects as we go through the for loop. And LCV, first time we get to this line is 0, with here and here. So 0 for these parameters, 0 is fed in. The second time we get here, LCV is 1, so 1 is fed in through the parameters to the constructor of lot. And that's the way the for each loop works. So the 3 parts: starting condition, stopping condition, and the increment of the loop control variable. Okay. We'll see lots more use of traditional arrays, so like traditional for loops, when we deal with traditional arrays, which are distinct from array lists. Okay. Oops, don't want that to be shown. Coming back to that guy later. All right, so the while loop. Here's a while loop works like this. While this condition, right, this Boolean expression evaluates to true, as long as this condition is true, the body of the loop is executed. The statements in the body of the loop are carried out. Now let's look at the specifics here. We have an integer variable called lot number, which is starting out at 0. And as long as lot number is less than lots.size, so this is referring to this sample array down here, right? And the size of this has 10 elements in it. So So as long as the lot number is less than the size of the number of elements in the array, then drop into the body of the loop and do what's there. So in this case we do, we're going to output system.out.println the array list lots. And we use the method, the array list method get, and get requires a parameter to know which of the elements in the list we want. In this case we want the 0 element because that's what lot number is equal to. After printing out the 0 element, this guy, right, we increment lot number and come back up here to check to see that lot number is still less than lot.size, which it is. And then we come back into the loop and we output that guy, increment, check, print, increment, check, print, right? That's the way it works. Okay, pretty straightforward. Okay, now let's look at the use of this with an iterator. Oops. I still don't want you showing, so go away. Okay. Now an iterator, as I said in the last video, this triangle represents an iterator object. Now, what is an iterator object? An iterator object is an object that keeps track of where it is within a list. So it knows in an array list or an array or any Java collection that implements the iterator, that implements iterators, it keeps track of where the iterator knows where it is within the collection. So here we see that it's at the beginning of the collection, all the way over at the left of the collection. Okay? So the lots is an array list, and it has, the array list class has a method called iterator, which returns an iterator object that works with the type of object that is stored in the lots array list. And so you see that over here we've declared an iterator object called it, and we've said, using the angle brackets, the generic class notation, that this iterator works with lot objects. Right? So you have to do this when you use an iterator. You have to specify what type of object is in the collection that you're going to iterate through. And then we use any variable name here, in this case, it. So now let's go down to the loop and see how we actually use this. Well, it, this guy, the iterator, dot has next. The iterator object, the iterator objects of the iterator class have 3 methods. They have this has next method, which basically you could think of as saying, okay, the iterator knows where it is, and the has next method says, is there something more in the collection? Is there something more, in this case of array lists, is there something to the right of me, right? Are there more objects for me to look at, to go through? And there are, so has next returns true. It can return true or false, so it's actually a method that returns a Boolean value. If it returns true, right, remember how the while loop works, if this evaluates to true, then we come down into the body of the loop and execute all the statements in the body of the loop. So just one statement here, system.out.println it.next. Okay, now the it again refers to this guy, so this is the second of the iterator methods. And the next method does 2 things. Moves the iterator over that whatever element of the collection it's next to, right? Moved it over to 0. And it returns a reference to the object it just moved over. So in this case, it returned a reference to this 0 object. this object, this lot object, where it has a 0 in it, right? And then we just are using the println method to output that object. That lot object obviously has a toString method, and so we can just use that object like this, and whatever that toString method for that object outputs will be output. So, so next does two things: moves the iterator over the object and returns a reference to the object it just went over. And every time, so now, well, every time it does, you do the next method with the iterator, it does that, moves it over, returns the reference to it. So the body of the loop is finished here. We come back to the loop condition. We ask the iterator basically, hey, you got a next one? And the iterator says, I do, or true. So we come into the body of the loop again and go through this process of moving this guy over one. And we return this guy, reference to this object, and output it. And we keep doing that until this is moved all the way over here. Oops, I don't want to do that. Let me do this. And in which case, when we get to this it.hasNext, there's nothing to the right of it, so it stops. That's it. It's over. And the loop, it's false, and the loop ends, and we continue on with the program. Okay? Now, it all seems like it's a lot of work, right? Why don't we just use a for each loop or a regular while loop? Well, here's the problem. Let's shift this a bit so I can select these. If we delete that object from the array list, what happens? Well, we know what happens. Or you hope you know, hope you remember. Right? These guys all shift down because array lists can't have any holes in them. Right? No blanks. So those guys all move down. And the problem there is that if we're using a regular while loop to do that, the while loop variable, right there, lot number, after we've removed this guy, that increases, lot number increases. So it would move to, if we deleted the thing at the one element in that loop, after deleting it, lot number would increment by 1, right? And it would now be pointing here, and we would never examine that object because of the fact that this all slid over on us. Okay. Now there are ways to you could use if statements in here and say if you delete something from the array list, then don't increment lot number. And if you do delete something, don't increment lot number. If you don't delete anything, then increment lot number. But then you're getting to a point where it's almost as complicated as using an iterator. Okay? So, now, that thing that I hid before, there it is. So let's say we wanted to get rid of, in this case, objects that have a 1 here. And we'll say that the getNumber method for the lot class returns that number. So let's see what we have here. We've moved the iterator back here. It.hasNext is true. So now we say if it.next, well, remember what it.next does, right? It moves that guy over and returns a reference to that object. So now we have a reference to the 0, this object, and then we use that reference to get to this method, the getNumber method, and that returns the number, which is 0. It isn't equal to 1, so we don't remove it. Okay? So, and this is all that's in the body of the loop. We come back to here. hasNext, there is, hey, do you have one to your right? You do. Okay, move over to there. And now it.next returned this guy, as well as moving the iterator over. And then so we can do getNumber, and it is equal to 1. So now we can do it.remove. So what happens with it.remove? Well, the iterator object, does this and moves all of this over. Oops. Let's deselect those guys. Okay. That's okay. Moves all of those guys over. Right? But notice where the iterator is. Right? The iterator also sort of got moved over. And we're still, when we go back up to it.next, we're going to move over the to object. And we'll do this if it.next, the object we just moved over, is .getNumber equals 1, which it doesn't, so we don't do anything. Okay? So the iterator helped us deal with this case, this fact that if you delete an element in an array list, that everything to the right of that slides over. But because the iterator in effect slides over with those things, it still knows, keeps track of what elements in the array list it's looked at already and what elements in the array list it hasn't looked at. So as I put this all back together, let's see. Oops. There. And I hide that. And this was a long video, and I apologize for that. But the problem is that iterators are kind of tricky. And most students find them kind of tricky. I find them kind of tricky still. So iterators are not data, an aspect of programming that I used before programming with Java, which started about 5 years ago. So all the time that I taught programming before that, I never used iterators. But they're actually, once you get used to them, they're very useful. And what I would suggest is that you try not to shy away from using them. Right? If opportunities come to use iterators in your programming assignments, then take those opportunities, and pretty soon the use of them will become second nature, and you'll even start to like them, I think. Okay, so that's it for now.